Okay. Hello, everyone. Yesterday we went over Introduction, Welcome to Adventure, and today we're going to be talking about Chapter 1, actually playing the game and how you're going to work through it. This is the Player's Handbook for the 2024 edition. This is the cover art for it. Let's get back into it. So, just want to point out D&D has some really good art that comes out. You know, got a lot of creative people in the space. It can be very impressive. And one of the key ingredients for Dungeons and Dragons is imagination. So remember that. It's a cooperative game. It can also be competitive though, depending on how you want to play it with your DM and yeah, your general actions. They have a little bit where they have a DM explaining like Ravenloft's gameplay. And then it goes down into what like the players are actually doing, and this is more or less like ways to set a scene. It's not exactly necessary for a dungeon master, but it just gives you a general idea right there. Pause it if you want to like read through that. Um, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the heavy text portions. Just pause where applicable. Um, Player or DM. To play D&D, you need one person to be the dungeon master, and the other players, 3 to 6, are recommended to be adventurers. And then you have to decide which role in the party you want to be. And there's quite a few different roles, but we'll go into that later. Um, but generally, I'd recommend if you're starting out, 3 to 4 players is probably all right. If you're a more experienced DM, you can go up to 5, 6. I've seen tables that are like 12 people. They go very slowly, but it can be a lot of fun with the right group. So, you know, play it how you like it. If you're a player, you're going to be one of the protagonists of the group's adventure. Um, if you want to be a player, you got to be a protagonist in the adventure. You're gonna have to make a character. You're gonna have an alter ego in the game, effectively. You're going to have a cast of characters, the usual suspects, I imagine, that you're going to be with, and then you're going to go out to many different locations, dungeons, mountains, forests, swamps, forgotten gods, and unknown entities. It is all right there in front of you, just a DM conversation away. If you're going to be the dungeon master, you like figuring out what exactly this world is going to be and how things are going to play and what's going to happen. This is more likely what's going to be your thing. You're going to be building the worlds and the adventures. You're going to be guiding the story, and you're going to also be the rule judiciary. You're going to decide how things are ruled, if something works that way, if something doesn't. Generally, I recommend, you know, some things you want to be less flexible on, some things you want to be more flexible on. It is better to it's better to allow occasional one-offs in my opinion. Every DM is going to come to a different opinion, but when you're starting out, don't worry if it's not always consistent. Just go in it where you're just figuring stuff out and you're having fun. Like that is the most important part, um, is doing that. So the players describe what their characters do. Typically, the character sticks together as they travel. Oh, sorry, rhythms of play. I've read through this already, so it's a little bit of me going through this a bit quicker. The three main pillars of D&D players are social interaction, the behavior between the player characters, exploration, and then combat. Depending on your DM, you are likely to get a little more of one or the other. It's very rare you entirely lose out on one of these branches, but not entirely impossible. Um, So generally, when you're getting into a new environment, these are going to be the like three actions normally that are going to happen right at the start. The dungeon master is going to describe what you're seeing or the scene, sights, smells, touches, uh, yeah, the five senses. Um, you're going to be getting that. Then the players are going to describe what their characters do or how they're reacting to those descriptions. Then the DM narrates the results of those actions. And that's going to loop 1,001 times. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does, but generally speaking, I would say this is pretty accurate. The exceptions supersede general rules. As I said, play loosey goosey, but even inside of the same rule set, they call out exceptions. If there is a general rule that you have consistently done every single time, and now a weird situation has occurred or a special item has a ability, it supersedes that rule. Don't worry about it. That's just how it is. General rules govern each part of the game. For instance, combat rules tell you melee attacks use strength and range attacks use dexterity. That's a general rule. That rule is in effect as long as something in the game doesn't explicitly say otherwise. Like dexterity weapons. They use their melee weapons, they use your dex instead of your strength. It, yeah, is that a little different? Yeah, but that's the effect of the item, and that's perfectly fine. There are many items that have unusual effects. You're in a realm where there are literal dragons and fireballs and talking water and squirrels. A weapon using dex instead of strength isn't that strange. Or constitution, even. It could be whatever stat you want. But yeah, you got to go figure it out. You got to explain it to the DM. Um, and yeah, that's just how this world is. Ongoing games. Sometimes a session of D&D is a complete game in and of itself. They're called one-shots. I've mentioned them before, where you play a short adventure that lasts just one session. More often, though, D&D sessions are connected in a longer adventure that takes several sessions to complete. And adventures can be strung together in large narratives called campaigns. I tend to like running campaigns. Um, that is just my personal style. Some people just all they do are these one shots. Like there are DMs that they just run one shots. That's it. Um, Everyone has their own kind of thing, and players will find that they have a preference towards one or the other. Um, that's fine. Campaign is a TV-like series, with an adventure is like a season of the series. A game session is a single episode, and it might be self-contained, but it usually links to a larger plot if there is one. Great example, if you want to see this, is Vox Machina. You can watch it on YouTube, where you could live watch the actors actually go through the entire campaigns, or Amazon Prime has it animated now. Very good. I either of them is a great example. I'd personally recommend if you're wanting to learn D&D though, like how to really play it, you don't watch the animated one. Watch like the first season. I have difficulty recommending the first season because of I understand the man was sick, but his name was Tiberius. He had some poor behavior due to medical issues, is my understanding. And yeah, it's a really good series. I highly recommend watching it, but I have to warn just out the bat that just a couple episodes in, um, there you see a problematic player and how people try to go about handling it, and it's good in teaching you etiquette and behavior for D&D, but it isn't necessarily at all times the best watch due to it. It's a little uncomfortable in moments. Most of the time, it's fine. Most of the time, it's great. He's a great player. Um, it's just, medications can cause you to have moments of issues. Um, That is what it is. Adventures. An adventure might be created by the dungeon master or purchased. The example of play in this chapter are inspired by the publishing adventures of the Curse of Strahd. So that's another really popular story. You can see right here a little bit of it. Pause it if you want to read through what exactly the chapter notes are. But yeah, there's a lot of different environments. You go explore them, you deal with traps, negotiate mysteries, and more arise. Again, very length and complexity between one shot and campaigns. Um, just going to go really quickly through that adventure section. Campaigns, probably also going to be going quickly through this one. A campaign is a series of adventures that are strung together in a narrative. Some campaigns are episodic, where adventures are their own tales, and not much besides the player characters link it to the next one. Other campaigns involve long-running plots, as I said, and reoccurring NPCs. This is where like your stat blocks or other information can be really useful, but you don't necessarily need them. Let's see here. At the adventure, a DM might create a campaign from scratch, which is more of my style. Assembling a campaign from a published adventure or mixed homemade material with published material, which is also something that I do. Um, that's pretty standard. I feel a lot of DMs do a little bit of home brewing due to different preferences of the players. Not always, but yeah, if you want a rule made or you want something discovered or figured out, talk to your DM. I'm really friendly about it. Most DMs are. They're willing to talk and have things figured out, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. Dice adds randomness to the games, and they help to determine what characters and monsters are successful at. And these are just a couple of your dice. So they have the listing right here: D4, D6, D8, D10. D10, the 10 digits, these two together are used to make your D100, which there actually are D100s, but they're a little wonky. So normally you use those together. Then you have your D12 and your D20. There isn't a D3 in this one, which is kind of good. I always found that as kind of an awkward dice to use, but you know, some people use them. Oh, they also have the round down rule. So whenever you divide or multiply a number in the game, round down if you end up with a fraction or even a fraction is 1/2 or greater. Some rules make an exception and tell you to round up. That's very important. Always look to see if it calls out round up or round down. Of course, you can homebrew that and say it's always round down or it's always round up or whatever. Remember, specific rules always supersede general rules. That is a general rule. You can supersede it. Dice notion. The dice used in D&D are referred by the letter D, followed by the number of the sides. And that's how exactly the naming convention is done. So if you're looking at a weapon and it calls out 3d8 plus 5, that's telling you you have 3 of the d8s and you have a base value of 5. So if you were to roll them and you got a 2, 3, and a 5, you would have 5 at base plus the 2 plus the 3 plus another 5, making you 15. And that's how it works. For a second there, I saw that 5 there, and I was like, wait a second, did I do the exact same math but just mess it up? No, I didn't. It was just reading them out. Percentile die. I don't normally do this, but some stories do if you're using books. Um, they refer to a D100, and actually they're now going to discuss the D100 right here. They do exist. Most of the time, you just use the two 10-sided die, and they're referred to as percentile dice. You can just get a number from 0 all the way to 100. That's how that works. One die you designate before roll gives a 10 digits, and the other one gives a 1 digit. If you roll a 7 on the 10 digits and a 1 for the 1 digits, for example, that number would be 71. So that would be on the zeros dice. Oh, also, 2 zeros represent the 100. So it's not 0, 0, it is full 0. But you have to get both zeros to have that occur. Otherwise, actually, can you get 0 on that? I don't actually think you can achieve 0. I think you can achieve 1, but I don't think you can achieve 0. So 1 to 100, I think, effectively. Yeah, I guess. Oh, they actually do call out a D3. The same D notion appears to be expressed in D3, even though it's a rare to find a dice with only 3 sides. To simulate a D3, roll a D6 and divide the number by 2. That's a pretty fair way of doing it. So, what do you use dice for? You have the D20 test. 20-sided die, or D20, is the most important die you'll be using in the game. It is the centerpiece. Everything pretty much runs through this probability group. It's used to determine whether you succeed or fail on tests, constitution scores. Oh, pardon me. I am yawny today. You roll a d20 whenever a character tries to do something, and the DM is pretty much deciding what difficulty it's going to be. So they can call out a DC check of 10, which is you have to roll 10 or higher to pass. Generally speaking, they have a rule called meets beats. Not always. Some people do not play with that. But I'd say that's a pretty common rule to be having. If you match the number that is called out, you beat it. So keep that in mind. And the general normal distribution is 5, 10, 15, 20. Not always. There's also like 13, 12. You hear those every now and again, but normally it's intervals of 5. And that's what you're going to be getting for like your strength checks, your dex checks, your constitution checks, wisdom, intelligence, and charisma. Damage, the most common use for dice other than d20 is determine damage, and when you make a successful attack roll, one of the the d20 tests, you will then roll whatever the damage die associated is to whatever you use, be it a weapon, magic, improvised weapon like dropping a boulder on someone. All of that should have a die associated to it. Generally, when you get an equipment, that will be called out for it, but in the case of being an improvised thing like cartoon dropping an anvil on someone or a boulder, the DM will normally tell you how much damage that is, how many damage dice that is. And most of the time the player rolls for the damages, but that isn't always the case. So, random tables. Occasionally, you'll see a table that uses a die roll to generate a random result. On these tables, you'll see die express, such as D10 or D100 in the header of the leftmost column. Roll that die and find a number you rolled or a range containing that number in the column. Read how that row has the results, and you'll see what's going to happen. For example, this trinkets table. So you go in and you roll D100, and there's all these different trinkets, from apparel to socks to a dragon's talon. Like, it can be anything. You could find a lich. You could find a dead squirrel. You have no idea what on earth you're going to get whenever you find one of these tables. But almost always, it is comedic. And it's also kind of fun for the DM. So I have mixed feelings on using it, because I normally like a little more rigidity to my story, but that can be a really fun and funny way to just mess with something. And if you wanted to do that, go ask your DM. Go ask me. I'm perfectly fine doing it. That's not a problem. Yeah, Then percentage chance. Sometimes you might see a rule describing a percentage chance of something happening. For example, a rule might say there's a 5% chance of something happening. You can determine that the thing happens by rolling a percentile die. If the roll is equal to or less than the percentage chance, 1 to 5 for example, it happens. So that's how you do the percentile. Interpreting a die roll in the story. Part of the fun of D&D is interpreting what a die roll means in the story. The randomness of that dice bring often introduced the unexpected. An expert fails, a novice succeeds, and any number of other twists. When a d20 test or other roll precedes a surprise, the Dungeon Master often gives a fun description of what happens. If you're a player, look for opportunities to interpret your character's die roll and describe why things unfold unexpectedly or even humorously. I am 100% in line with this. Guys, if you are rolling a dice and I flounder for a second, pitch something. I am 100% down. If you got a really good reason or a really good story or anything that you think you can spin, go for it. Why not? We're all in this together. It's a journey together. Go for it. Sorry, I'm hearing Ada paw at a door, I think. It's good she's not hiding in a closet or jumping on clothes or doing other things, but that cat, love her. Never know what she's going to do. Now we're going to be getting into the 6 abilities. All character, uh, all creatures, characters, and monsters have 6 abilities that are measured both physical and mental characteristics, as shown on the ability description table. And they are strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. This is going to need a little bit of explaining. Strength is how well you crush a tomato. Dexterity is how well you throw a tomato. Constitution is how many tomatoes you can eat. Intelligence is knowing that tomatoes are a fruit. Wisdom is knowing that even though they are a fruit, they do not go in a fruit salad. Charisma is how well you can sell a tomato. And that is the tomato analogy for all of these ability scores. Hold on. Chica? I think she's playing with the shoes. Little Scourgy. She is very cute, but my gosh, you never know what she is going to do. And if I can hear her through my headset, she's doing something really loud. But yeah, that's cats for you. Ability score that are these things, they range from 1 to 20. If you somehow manage to get into the upper 20s and even hit 30, you have very, very strong abilities like dragons and like elder worms, tesseracts, gods have ability scores past 20. Mortals and normal beings, uh, even immortals, most of them don't even go above 20 too often. So yeah, it isn't something that you're often going to run into. And if you find out something is above a 20 and you're a level 2 character, um, maybe don't, piss it off. Maybe. Unless I'm trying to get you to piss it off, in which case, do piss it off. I want to see the results. Yeah. Here's an explanation. That is the lowest that a score can go. If you hit 0 on something, generally it will explain what happens. Oh, pardon me. 2 to 9 is relatively weak. This can range from not being able to speak, to not being able to read, to not being able to communicate. There are quite a few different impacts on weak scores. 10 to 11, since we are humans, everything is considered as a base reference to what a normal human could achieve. 12 to 19, this isn't necessarily on the scale of humans. These are past the scale of humans. Some of your like 11 could be your Olympic sprinter, but so could like a 12 to 13. If they're like insanely like top tier percentile, you start getting into 12s and 13s. Anything past that, you're starting to get into the superhuman level. At 20, you are like the highest level you can naturally get without, transcending your mortal bounds effectively. Not always. There are plenty, sorry, I speak English, of immortals that have sub 20 stats. Um, but generally they'll have one or two above 20. Generally. Um, and when you're getting to 21, 29, you are in the realm of the gods normally. And 30 is where it caps out, unless DM decides otherwise. But normally, if you read anything, it says, yeah, this thing caps at 30. This is the ability modifiers table. Pause it if you need it. Generally, it works in the rule of two. So 10 to 11 is your base. If you go 2 down, that's -1. 2 down from that is -2. 2 down from that is -3. 2 down from that is -4. If you're at 1, you're at -5. If you're 0, you're catatonic, dead, dying, suffering in some horrible capacity, or you are a rock. Okay, 12 to 13. +1, 14, 15, +2, yada, 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 yada. Exact, it, exact same way. It's rule two. They're all ranges. It's not a big deal. It's relatively straightforward. If you need this, though, I'd recommend taking a picture and using that. But most people can just kind of remember it after a bit of time with it. Okay, D&D tests. We already talked about this. This is where you roll your d20 and you're going to be dealing with your modifiers or like skills or other bonuses that you get, like your base attack bonus and so on. So when you do it, you're going to roll the d20. You're going to add in the relevant modifier, which you can find in the rule glossary. You get proficiencies, and you can add those in. And then there's circumstantial, which can be advantage, disadvantage, which I'll go into more detail later on, or a flat modifier of positive or negative. Then you're going to compare that to that DC that I explained, the difficulty class, if it's 5, 10, 15, 20, 13, 12, whatever it is. That's what it's going to be. Technically speaking, you'd think a D20 would make that the maximum. Ooh, pardon me. You'd think that the D20 would make it the maximum difficulty that something can be, but difficulty can actually go above a D20. As I said, you can get modifiers, so you can go to like nat 30. That it's entirely possible, like where you can roll um, even like a 1 and 2 and still end up with the over 20 on your score with some classes. Um, that's not a bug, it's a feature. Some people are insanely good. However, there are still ways to fail. Zeros are possible. And some people just put it as you critically fail because you weren't paying attention or some mistake, to it's just a -10. It's kind of up to the DM to rule it. And sometimes they have mercy guidance. If you just keep rolling them ones, that happens. So, yeah, ability checks. Um, Pretty much the same thing. These are just going to have a DC and you're going to have to beat it. Ability modifiers. These are going to be like your strength, intelligence, and so on that are going to be helping you with these advantage, disadvantage rolls and other things like that. Oh, wait, hold up. They have it right here. Advantage, disadvantage rolls. I thought that was lower down. Pardon. So advantage is pretty much you roll two d20s, you pick the higher one. Disadvantage, you do the exact same thing, but you pick the lower one. It's effectively what it is. You just get a reroll. Ability checks. These are created using talents, training, and other things. Pretty much how well do you do something. For instance, a rogue would be very good at picking locks, most likely, while a wizard would be great at figuring out what something magical is. And if you ask a fighter to do either of those things, he's most likely going to suck. But if he wants to run for half a day and then beat the living crud out of someone, he's probably going to be better at it than either the rogue or wizard, because he has a constitution score that's probably higher, and he is more physically fit. But yeah, um, and these are some of the things. So strength is going to be lift, push, pull, break. Dexterity is nimbly, quickly, quietly. Constitution is pushing your body beyond the normal limits, like running an entire day. Reason or remembering is intelligence. Wisdom is noticing things in the environment or its creatures' behaviors. Charisma is influence, entertain, or deceive. And that is very powerful when you're very creative. All these things here can be very powerful. These you have to be more directly, I feel. These you can kind of just ask a little more. So keep that in mind. Proficiencies, this is your acrobatics, your athletics, your lock picking, your sleight of hand. These are all the bonuses you will get to your DC 20 check. So these are quite useful when you're wanting to run up a wall, backflip, and throw a knife into someone. You know, a lot of cool things you can do, but it becomes significantly easier when you're proficient in the base skills. Um, Difficulty class, I've already talked about this. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. It's interesting that they're calling out actually 25 and 30. I don't think they did that previously, but yeah, it does go over. I forgot that was there. Man, I skimmed through this and I've read through this book so many times. It's just in different iterations. When you start reading through it line by line, it becomes more like, oh yeah, they are saying that here. Frustrating, but that's life, you know. Saving throws. This is, you have like your explosions, your poison traps, your slipping and falling off the edge. Are you going to be able to catch yourself before you go over? These are your strength, your dexterity, your constitution. These things are applied to it. So strength, physically resist, dodge out of the way. So your fireball, kind of getting around a corner to reduce the damage or something else. Constitution, how well can you handle toxins? Intelligence, figure out if you're being fooled. Um, Wisdom, someone's trying to mind control you. Not today, fool. Assert your identity. Charisma is funny because you can both use that to charm someone and intimidate someone. So, a lot of different ways to use that. Proficiency bonuses goes on later. Difficulty class, we already talked about that. Attack rolls. These are going to be how exactly you hit someone in combat, one way or another. Strength is the melee attacks for weapons or unarmed strikes. Generally speaking, some things change that. Dexterity is your range attacks, and varies are your spell. Some of them are touch, some of them are range, some of them are, purely intelligence, some of them are wisdom, some of them are charisma. They all vary based upon what the caster modifier is. And every spell casting class has a different modifier. So, proficiencies, we've already talked about that. Armor class. This is something that's a little bit different. This is how well you are at resisting getting hit. Most of the time, you're assumed at a base of 10, and then the modifier is going to be what impacts it. Now, you can have different armors that affect your base valuations and stuff like that, but generally speaking, this is how it works. You're a base 10, your dexterity impacts it. Items, magic items, spells, and more can impact that even more. Multiple features can have their. Yeah, so generally speaking, there's only one calculation type of effect on a creature. There could be different types of ways of doing the calculations, and you can play around with it so that way they can be more resilient to certain things or another, but just be aware this is the standard equation. Oh man, this is a long section. Rolling a 20 or a 1. 20 is a natural 20. 1 is generally regarded as a natural miss or a critical failure. Critical hits or something else we'll be going over. Advantage or disadvantage. We've talked about it a little bit, but we will mention that they don't stack. Multiple situations affects the roll, and they can grant advantage or disadvantage. However, if you roll the 2 dice, only one of them is true. So, just note. Also, you can get multiple advantages and multiple disadvantages, but at the end of the day, they simply cancel out each other until you either have advantage, standard roll, or disadvantage. They don't stack. So, interactions with rerolls. When you have an advantage or disadvantage and something in the game lets you reroll or replace a d20, you can reroll or replace only one die, not both. But you do get to pick one. So, that is quite useful. If you have heroic inspiration, you can roll a 3 and an 18 on an ability check, and that has advantage or disadvantage. You could expend a heroic inspiration to re-roll one of those dice. So if you were like trying to figure out, okay, I can pick like these 2 die because I have advantage, I would go with the 18, but I could try to re-roll the 3 and see if I get a nat 20. So there are times and place for it. But inversely, let's say you rolled a 1 and a 2. You could choose to still risk having that 2, but remove the definite I failed if you had disadvantage. So take the 1, you re-roll it. Hopefully you don't get a 1 again, and then yeah, you're stuck with a 2, but you're not stuck with a critical failure. So it is useful. Heroic inspiration. Sometimes the DM or a rule gives you heroic inspiration. If you have heroic inspiration, you can spend it to reroll any die immediately after rolling it, but you must use the new roll. Only one at a time. You can never have more than one heroic inspirations at a time. And if you have the player character in the group that lacks it and could use it, you can give it to them, which is a really big thing because you can save some people from absolute death. Gaining heroic inspiration. Your DM normally is the one that gives heroic inspiration for a variety of reasons. Typically, it's to award someone for doing something particularly heroic or being entertaining. It's just a way to do positive reinforcement. Proficiencies. Characters and monsters are good at various things. Some are skills with weapons, others are more intrinsic, some of them are being able to use magic more efficiently. The monsters will generally call that out in their stat sheet, and you will see their challenge rating. Proficiency bonuses tables shown how the bonus is determined. This bonus is applied to a DC 20 test. So, up to 4 base, 5, 9, so on, so on, so on. It scales a little bit. I would recommend having a picture of this. I forget these sometimes. Not always, but sometimes I do forget it. So, yeah, it's more in groups of 3 in this case, but not always. Bonuses don't stack also. So if you have, proficiency bonus can't be added to the die roll or any number more than once. If your roll allows you to take a charisma, deception, or persuasion check, you add your proficiency bonus of your proficient in that skill, but you don't add it twice if you're proficient in both skills. So, very important. Sometimes it calls for multiplying or dividing before being added. So, Expertise is an example of that. Now we're going to be getting into some of the skills that you can have. This is not a full list. This is just the general skills that you're going to be getting starting out. And that's going to be your acrobatics, animal handling, arcana, athletics, deception, history, insight, intimidation, investigation, medicine, nature, perception, performance, persuasion, religion, sleight of hand, stealth, and survival. I'm going to take it that if you need to like actually go through these one at a time, that you're going to pause it here. Okay. Determining skills. A character's starting skill proficiencies are determined by the character class, and monster skill proficiencies appear in their stat block. You do get to pick some depending on your race as well. Well, actually, I don't know if that's still true. Normally your class and race impact what skills you get. I don't know if that's necessarily true. We need to go further in to actually see that. Skills with different abilities. Each skill proficiency has an associated with an ability check. You'll notice right there is calling them out. For example, intimidation skill is associated with charisma. In some situations, the DM may allow you to apply your skill proficiency to a different ability check. For example, if a character tries to intimidate someone through physical strength, the DM could ask for a strength intimidation check rather than a charisma intimidation check. That character would make a strength check and add their proficiency bonus if they have the intimidation proficiency. So, something to remember. There's also some homebrewed feats that allow you to use physical instead of charisma, or strength instead of charisma and stuff like that. So you can ask for like special feats and stuff like that that allow you to swap individual scores um, for checks. Saving throw proficiency. These are if you're proficient in wisdom or dexterity or intelligence, um, having those stats added in to those resistances. Equipment proficiency. A character gains proficiency with the various weapons and tools of their class and background. There are two categories of equipment proficiencies. There's weapons, and then there's tools. If it's not a weapon, you don't use it to hurt someone, it is most often a tool. However, some tools can also be used as weapons. Um, it's very rare you have a weapon that is a tool. Like something that it's in that middle ground, very rare. Does happen, extremely rare. Now we're going to be going after some of the general actions you can be doing. You have attacks, attacks with weapon and unarmed. You have dashes, which effectively gives you an extra movement equal to your speed. Disengage allows you to run away without getting attacked. Very useful. Dodge. Till the start of your next turn, attack rolls against you have disadvantage, and you make a dexterity saving throw with advantage. You lose this benefit if you have incapacitated condition or your speed is 0. So, if you want to get to a spot and call out you're going to dodge as your next action, you effectively gain advantage. Granted, if they have multiple advantages, they could negate your advantage still. So be aware of what you're going up against. Help. You can render aid to another character's attack roll, or medical assistance can be rendered. Hide. This is a stealth check. Influence. Make charisma or wisdom checks to alter a creature's attitude. So that's another action. Magic. Cast a spell, use a magic item, use a magical feature. Ready. You can leave a action to trigger off of a specific criteria. Search. Wisdom check. So that's your insight, medical, perception, and survival. Study is arcane, history, investigation, nature, and religion check. Those are all intelligence. And utilize. That is use something. It is non-magical. So, for instance, pulling a lever. That is utilize. Generally, things occur one at a time. Since time is supposed to be a fixed, linear experience. It is supposed to go sequentially. Actions can come up in any situation too. You can influence a creature or search a room or read someone's body language. Um, these are all things that you can do. Bonus actions. So you have an action and a bonus action and a move action. Or move distance. Let's not call it a move action. I think they actually went away from the move action in this. Various class features, spells, and other abilities allow you to take a bonus action. Um, this can only be occurring from a special ability or feature of the game. You start off with one bonus action. You can get more though. Otherwise, you don't have a bonus. Wait, you can take a bonus only when a spell or ability, spell or another feature states you can do something as a bonus action. Otherwise, you don't have a bonus action to take. Okay, interesting. So unless it's called out now, you don't have. Is it free action? Well, let's see once we get to turns and stuff like that. We'll get a better idea. You can only do one bonus action on your turn, so you must choose your bonus action to use if you have more than one available. Oh, okay, so you do get it. You only get it if you have something that you can use it on. If you have something you can use it on, you have a choice to activate it once per turn. Then you can only use it on one of the selection of bonus actions. Okay, that's fair. Reactions. These are things like opportunity attacks from someone trying to run away without doing a disengage action. You can attack them. What would your character do? Ask yourself as a player, what would my character do? Playing a role involves some amount of getting into another person's head and understanding what motivates them and how that translates into action. In D&D, those actions unfold against the backdrop of a fantastic world full of situations we can only imagine. How does your character react to those situations? So, I'm going to just slowly uh, pan down through this. I recommend pausing it when we're talking about the role playing stuff. Um, these are more loosey goosey. People will more or less have to infer how they want to go about interacting with things, if they want a sensory, if they just want to talk, if everyone's going to be role playing. This is really set by the table. So pay attention to it, know your DM, know your players. Ability checks, we've already gone through that, but that impacts the social aspect as well. So they're going to be going through some of the social interactions here. I'd recommend pausing this as necessary so that way you can read through this if you're interested, but I'm not going to be spending a lot of time on this. I've already spent almost 40 minutes trying to go through how this all works. As I said, this is going to be a very long video. Exploration. It's a dangerous world out there. A lot of things can occur. That way, the way you handle it is why you have. Did I even speak English? Was that it? Because the world is dangerous, you have adventuring equipment. The way you handle those dangers is through this equipment and your skills and your spells and other abilities. You can have things like thieves' tools, caltrops, um, yeah, your quarterstaff, which is your weapon. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Vision and light, these are things that impact how well you can be seen. There are things that grant you advantage, which is like your perception check, but if you're in low light, you could get disadvantage. So go far enough, you become blinded, which is a condition. We'll be going over that later. Light, discuss bright light, dim light, um, darkness, if you're obscured or not, special senses. There's hiding, whether or not you're visible or invisible to a individual, interacting with objects. Um, what are objects? It kind of goes through time limited objects, finding hidden objects, carrying objects, um, Some people are very loose on this. I tend to be more loose on the carry weight unless it's like extreme. But breaking objects, hazards, burning, dehydration, falling. Oh, actually, I'll just hold these out so you can pause them as needed. So those things are situational. Generally, your DM will let you know if you're going to be at risk of these things occurring. Okay, travel. These are how you're going to be getting between combats and cities, towns, social events. Uh, how you travel is very much determined by the setting. Um, Marching orders is what they're calling the order you're going in. If you're hitting traps or spotting enemies, which one would be the closest to enemies or traps or discovering the treasure or something like that. Generally, having someone with a high passive perception is beneficial um, for this kind of thing. Travel pace. While traveling outside, groups can move fast, normal, or slow. So, yeah. Groups can move twice that distance for 1 hour, after which the mounts need a short or long rest before they can move at that increased pace again, if you're using mounts. So, this is how fast it is. Generally speaking, I homebrew this. Everyone does this slightly differently. And I'm just going to let you read through that. Vehicles, again, these are homebrewed. I'm not going to worry too much about it, but we're going to have this kind of read through. I'm going to let, pause as needed. Okay. Combat is relatively straightforward once you get used to it. Generally, there is an order of combat. This is determined by initiative. Um, we're going to go over exactly what initiative is in a later point, but generally, I'm just going to let you know your initiative decides when you go in the turn order. Combat, step by step. First, you establish positions. You determine where the characters and monsters are located. Then you're going to roll your initiatives, and then you're going to work through the queue effectively, take turns. Initiatives determine the order of turns in combat. As I said, surprise is something that can be done that can pose disadvantage on your initiative roll. For instance, getting ambushed can make you go later in the turn order. Initiative order, as I said, that is everyone as they stack out in the group. Ties, since everyone is rolling initiative and it's a DC check or DC roll, DC 20 roll. No, it's a die 20 roll. I'm getting tired. I've been at this for over an hour, for almost an hour. Ties occur. The DM decides the order amongst the tied monsters. The players decide the order amongst tied characters. So that's how it goes. Your turn. You move up to your speed. Uh, you can take one action. You decide whether to move first or take your action first. The main action you take are listed in actions early in the chapter. A character features the monster stats also provide action options. Movement and position later in this chapter give for the rules for your movement. Communicating. Communicate however you are able through brief utterances and gestures as you take your turn. Doing so uses neither your action nor your move. Extended communication, such as detailed explanations or something, or an attempt to pursue a foe, requires an action. The influence action is the main way you try to influence a monster. Interacting with things in the environment for free during either your move or action, for example, could open a door during your move as you stride towards a foe. If you want to interact with a second object, you need to take the utilize option. some magic items or special objects always require an action to be used. But ask your DM, that's normally homebrewed. Whether or not something ends up becoming full action or free or a bonus action or something like that, it's very situational. So talk to your DM on those. Doing nothing on your turn. You can forego moving or taking action or doing anything at all on your turn. If you can't decide what to do, consider taking a dodge or a ready delaying action. End of combat. Everything's been killed or knocked out. She is crawling underneath my feet now. Movement and positioning. So on her turn, you can move the distance of your speed or less. You can also climb, crawl, jump, and swim. Let's see here. Just pause if interested. There we go. However, you're moving with your speed, you deduct the distance of each part of your move from it until it's used up or until you're done moving, whichever comes first. So, the character speed is determined during the character creation. The monster speed is noted in the monster stat block. There's also climbing speed, fly speed, and swim speed. These correlate to, well, swimming, really, and climbing. Difficult terrain. This is situational, depends on the DM. They will normally call it out, but normally a square is 5 feet if you're using a grid system, and then rather than moving by foot, moving square by square on the grid using your speed as a 5-foot segment. You can translate your speed into squares by dividing it by 5, so 30 feet is a 6 square move. When you enter a square, you have to pay the movement to be able to enter it. So, corners, diagonal movements, don't cross the corner of a wall or a large tree or other terrain that fills that space. Ranges, determine the range by the number of grids, and you want to count the shortest route. Breaking up your movement, you can break up your movement using some of the movement before and after any action, bonus action, or reaction you take on the same turn. For example, you have 30 feet, you can go 10 feet, take an action, then go 20 feet. Dropping prone. On your turn, you can give yourself the prone condition without using any action or any of your speed, but you can't do so if your speed is 0. Creature size. A creature belongs to a size category which determines the width of the square space. Ooh. So, these are all the different sizes. Creatures and characters all have them determining on their race. Yeah. Also, I think some tools might also impact in an armor. But moving around other creatures, creature has an incapacitated condition. A tiny creature or a creature that's 2 sizes larger or smaller than you can pass through that square no problem. This is what incapacitated is. Okay, these are the ways you do an attack. You choose a target, you determine what modifiers are used, you resolve that attack. Your attack is successful if you beat their DC. So if they have a DC 10, you just have to roll higher than a 10, or meet a 10. Cover. There are quite a few different covers. They seem to only go with everything past half. So half cover is 2 bonus to AC and dexterity. 3/4 is +5 bonus to AC and dexterity saving throws. If you are totally covered, you can't be targeted directly. For instance, tower shields can give you full cover. They call it total now instead of full, but they're the exact same thing. Unseen attackers and targets. When you make an attack roll against a target you can't see, you have disadvantage on the roll. That is true whether you're guessing at the target's location or the target's a creature you can hear but not see. If that target is in the location you targeted, you missed. When a character you can't see you have you have advantage on attack rolls against it. If you're hidden when you make an attack roll, you give away your location when the attack hits or misses. up to a point. If it's a wide enough miss, I generally home rule they might not have noticed an arrow sail way over their head. You know, maybe if you're too close, they can hear the thwack of the bow, but they might not hear the arrow. Ranged attacks. It's the exact same way as your like melee, but with a little bit of differences. I will let you pause on this if you want it. Okay. Melee attacks. Generally, everything has a 5-foot reach. Or sorry, everything can only attack the square next to it unless it has a special call out like range or reach. Reach generally gives you an additional square to attack. So anything that is 2 squares away, you can hit. Opportunity attacks, combatants watching for an enemies to drop their guard, or if they move heedlessly past their foe, they can get an attack. Avoiding attacks of opportunity is something that is quite useful, and you can use a disengage action to do that. You also don't provoke attacks of opportunity when you teleport, so leave that up there, or when you move without using your move action or bonus. Or so, if you are moved by a move action without using your move action, bonus action, or reaction. So like special feats or spells or other things like that, things that are unique. That's what gives you it. Attack of opportunity, as long as you can see the target, have a reaction. Oh, yeah, and they're still inside of your reach. Mounted combat, this is a whole thing in and of itself. Um, I'm not going to go through this in extreme detail because normally you only get mounts much later on in the game. If you want, you can look through this. I will go slow enough to allow people to actually read through it. Underwater combat. Okay, damage and healing. Hit points. Everyone has a certain amount of hit points, creatures and players. If your hit points get reduced, you are injured. If you're not, you're uninjured. If it goes to 0, you're unconscious. If you half your hit points or fewer, you're bloodied, which is no game effect on its own, but it might trigger other effects. So if you're under half, that's it. Resting. Adventurers can't spend every hour adventuring. They need rest. Any creature that takes an hour-long short rest in the midst of a day or an 8-hour-long rest to end it regains hit points is one of the benefits of the rest. The rules glossary provides for the rules of the short and long rest. Damage rolls, we'll talk about that later on. Critical hits, it's pretty straightforward. I think just read through this. Saving and damaging throws. There are a bunch of damage types. Resistance and vulnerability. There is no stacking for these. And there's an order of application for these. So adjustments such as bonuses, penalties, and multipliers are applied first. Resistances are applied second. Vulnerabilities are applied third. Oh, sorry. Character with resistance to all damage and vulnerability. All damage, but has a vulnerability to fire, and with a magical aura that reduces all its damage by 5, takes 28 fire damage. The damage is reduced by 5 at first to 23, then it's halved by the creature's resistance down to 11, then doubled for its vulnerability to 22. That's how that works. Immunity. It has no impact if you use that type. So if it's physical immunity, you can't hurt it with physical. If it's magical immunity, you can't hurt it with magical. If it's immunity to acid, you can't hurt it with acid. If it's immune to fire, it cannot be hurt by fire. Just no. Dropping to 0 hit points. Sometimes they can just die instantly. Monsters are generally considered dead if they hit 0. Hit point maximum of 0. Creature dies its hit point maximum reaches 0, which is a drain. Life energy can do this. Massive damage can instantly kill you. Sometimes when you hit 0, you simply are unconscious, and then you begin death saving throws. We'll go more into that later, but this is the impact of unconscious. You should read through that. Knocked out creatures, when you're reduced to 0 hit points with a melee attack, you then reduce that creature to 1 hit point and give it the unconscious condition. It then starts a short rest at the end of which the condition ends. The condition ends early if the creature regains any hit points, or if someone takes an action to administer first aid to it, making a successful DC 10 Wisdom Medicine check. Death saving throws. You have 3 successes or failures. If you succeed them, you stabilize. If you fail them, you die. Successes and failures don't need to be consecutive. Keep track of both until you get 3 of a kind. So, maximum it can go is like, I think normally you can only get to 5, right? Because 3, so you get 2, and then at that point, you're effectively forced to get the third of any category, so you can only have 5 rolls. I think I did that. Yeah. Stabilizing a character. You can use a help action. Temporary hit points. These are kind of special. They are hit points that aren't real, that lose if you don't take damage, but they will prevent damage from going into your actual hit point pool. Some of them only last until a long rest. Temporary hit points don't stack. If you have temporary hit points and receive more temporary hit points, they do not stack on top of each other. It refreshes to the new value. That's how that works. You can't heal them back. These are conditions that you can get. I'm going to be going through these one by one. Pause it to read it. There we go. And now, duration. Conditions last for a duration specified by the effect. There we go. Conditions do not stack. There you go. This is going to be an example of combat. So you're going to pause this as needed and just focus on the individual areas. But yeah, there you go. We have now gone through the 2024 Player's Handbook playing the game section. I know I had to gloss over a good amount of it, but this is a massive section. There's going to be a lot that's going to have to get glossed over. I would recommend pausing this as needed. But thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day. Bye.